hopefully get a notification. Okay, so I'm Anthony from Vakeros. I work for a company called Finden. We're based in the UK, south of Oxford. I'll show you in the following slides. Primarily, we do materials characterization, and very often we focus on tomography-based techniques. So that's why it's the title of Unconventional X-ray Tomography. So hopefully you'll see something different today. So Finden is a small SME. As I mentioned, primarily we do materials characterization, although the past 7 years we have been working also on algorithm development and machine learning approaches to handle data, improve signal to noise ratio, but also solve various problems, artifacts present in tomographic datasets. Our clients vary quite a bit. For today, I'm going to focus the presentation on battery technologies, but we do all sorts of materials characterization, and we apply both lab-based techniques, but also synchrotron-based to do advanced chemical imaging and provide to our clients a unique chemical insight into materials and devices. So we're a small but quite diverse team. We have material scientists, but also applied mathematicians and machine learning people. Where are we based? I wanted to show you the Google Maps. So we're west of London. Hopefully you can see my pointer. And south of Oxford at the Harwell Science and Innovation campus, or the Rutherford Appleton laboratories. You can see here the diamond light source in the same campus. It's the headquarters of the Faraday Institution, although admin only, if I'm not mistaken. But also other large groups are hosted here, like the UK Catalysis Hub. We zoom in even further. The Finden offices are based in this building, so very close to the Diamond Light Source, which is the UK's national synchrotron facilities. What is the synchrotron? What's the advantage of being based here? The synchrotrons are, you can see a schematic on the right-hand side. They're large-scale facilities dedicated to producing, I might have to change headphones, very bright X-rays. Hopefully you can still hear me.
It's very soft.
Can you hear me now?
Much better.
No? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So the synchrotrons, as we said, are dedicated facilities producing very bright X-rays. There's a schematic on the left-hand side here. We can show that the brilliance can be more than 10 orders of magnitude higher compared to lab X-ray tubes, X-ray machines. So what does that mean? That means that you can perform experiments, either dynamic or 3D static, that are essentially infeasible in the lab. That is the key thing to, and also develop and apply more advanced material characterization techniques that also are infeasible in the lab or could take forever. So there are quite a few synchrotrons around the world. I think there are more than 50. Primarily at Finden, we visit European synchrotrons, such as the one in Grenoble, the ESRF, the European Synchrotron Radiation Facilities, as well as DESI in Hamburg, Germany, Soleil in France, etc. So there are quite a few in Europe, and the Diamond, that is light source that is next to us. We also perform lab tests. So we have our own labs to do. We do testing, not so much for batteries, but other functional materials. But as I said, most often we visit synchrotron facilities. And here, what I wanted to focus on today is a team of, let's say, of techniques that fall under the umbrella of chemical tomography. And in chemical tomography, you combine a scattering or spectroscopic technique with a tomographic data acquisition approach. So this is what we're gonna focus on today. But before we go there, let's take a step back and talk a little bit about absorption contrast tomography. You are probably familiar with these techniques through hospitals, so medical X-ray CT. It's essentially the same technique that we use to study materials and devices. In the simplest implementation, you have here a parallel beam geometry, it doesn't matter what it is, but we illuminate with an X-ray beam our object, for example, the 18650 battery here, and we're measuring the intensity of the transmitted X-rays through the sample. So essentially, we're collecting radiographs. But at the same time, we are rotating our sample. So you can see here the radiographs that we're collecting while the sample is being rotated, covering 0 to 180 degrees angular range. We can then use various reconstruction algorithms and get back our images. These are images that correspond to 2D cross-sections of our sample. So you can see probably here, just a second, a bright part will appear. This is the tab that you can see here on the battery, right? And of course, if you have a 3D matrix, you can also start having 3D volumes, 3D volume rendering, etc. X-ray CT, or microtomography, very often called, is a very powerful technique. And it has been very widely applied in battery research over the past 10-15 years, primarily associated with abuse testing of batteries. You can see where materials are cracking or components are cracking, and it is a non-destructive technique. So you can do dynamic experiments in the lab or at the synchrotron if you want to have good temporal resolution and spatial resolution. And then you can go back, take your sample and go back to the lab and perform extra characterization. However, you can see here that these are grayscale images. And because the difference, the contrast in these images arises from difference in density. That poses quite a few limitations, especially when we have light materials present in our device. So, for example, in our lithium-ion battery, and we lose information when we use a different type of technique. So, X-ray diffraction compute tomography. So we look at the diffracted signal, and this is most often performed at synchrotron facilities. We are able to get back this information, this lost information, because the contrast arises from differences in the chemistry of the sample, so the diffracted X-rays. So you can see here that it is very easy to see that's images from just a 2D cross-section of our cylindrical cell, right? So we can see our current collectors. We can even see the polymeric type separator that is transparent in the conventional X-ray CT. We can look at our cathode or our positive electrode. This was an NMC 532, and in this case, we noticed the presence of a secondary phase that this is not possible through absorption tomography or microtomography, and that was an inactive component in this battery, as well as different phases of the lithiated graphite. So you can imagine that it is possible to do this also dynamically. So you can even use this technique to study your battery under operating conditions, or, for example, when we have some clients from industry, they have problematic cells, or they don't understand why there are problems, and they want to do some static measurements. So this is also feasible. How does XRD-CT work, though? You have a very small, narrowly focused X-ray beam. You can see it here with the red arrow. And you illuminate your sample, and you collect two-dimensional diffraction patterns in transmission geometry. I have a little animation here, hopefully it will play. Yep. So you translate your sample across the X-ray beam, and at each translation step, you collect a 2D diffraction pattern. At the end of this line scan, you rotate your sample to the next tomographic angle, and you repeat this process till you cover 0 to 180 degrees angular range. So the next part in this data processing pipeline, let's say, is that you have to get all these diffraction patterns, 2D diffraction patterns, and integrate them, where sometimes you need to put filters, but it doesn't matter. You get a stack of sinograms when you reshape your data, and each sinogram corresponds to a different scattering angle. So we have been doing quite a few developments over the years, from acquisition to at the very last part, which is data analysis. And for these developments, we're very happy to be awarded last year the 2023 Analytical Science Horizon Prize by the Royal Society of Chemistry. And this was due to these developments we've been doing over the years, both technical, but also in terms of experiments, so novel experiments in situ and operando experiments with different functional materials and devices. How do the data look like? So hopefully the video will play. Okay, so this is the visualization of a single XRD-CT dataset. We have a 2D, as you can see at the top right, I have the icon of the 18650 battery. This is a 2D cross-section, but it corresponds to a chemical volume, because at each pixel in this image, we have a full diffraction pattern. So you have a characteristic signal, chemical signal per pixel. And that means that also when you analyze these local signals, you will get unique chemical maps that they may contain information that cannot be retrieved with any other means. So you can see here, for example, that we can, by scrolling in the third dimension, we can see different maps. Some could be corresponding to the, I think here it was an NCA positive electrode, the graphitic phases, etc. So it is, as a scientist, your goal is to go and analyze all these local signals. And you can understand how many are these. Here we have an image that is more than 600 by 600 pixels large. So that means this could be more than, just from a single data set, from a single XRD-CT data set, you can have more than 360,000 diffraction patterns to analyze. So there is a problem here with scale-up when it comes to the data analysis. Just bear this in mind. I wanted to show you some setups that they're available at different beam lines, at different synchrotrons, because it could be that a person from industry is not necessarily interested in measuring a a battery in a cylindrical form. Maybe they want to study a material during preparation, so during calcination, as an example, because I'm saying it because this has happened before. You can see that there are setups where you can use hot air blowers to increase the temperature, and at the same time probe use different gas environments, for example, helium, hydrogen, nitrogen, or whatever else you wish. And you can go with a very small beam and try to understand what is happening to the particles. That can be just a couple of hundred of microns large, or tens of microns, and you can go with a very small beam as the beam size defines the resolution in your reconstruct image. So you can even go with a sub-micron beam. On the right-hand side, you see an experiment. We use the solid oxide fuel cell, but it's the point here is that you can use also a potential stand in conjunction with this type of experiments. A PEM fuel cell on the left, so you can go from, as we said, a small capillary that to a real device, and on the right-hand side you can see an 18650 lithium-ion battery, and this was the first dynamic XRD-CT experiment ever performed. But before we go to the large batteries, we can have a look at this smaller scale, because industry is also often interested in studying the material properties. In this case, it was a small Schwarzschild cell, and we demonstrated the first region of interest, XRD-CT. And you can see that the width, the diameter of the Schwarzschild cell was about 3 millimeters, but we managed to recreate a very small region that was 350 microns with very high resolution and without any artifacts in these images. And this was a silicon graphite composite, and we were able to see the crystalline silicon particles, and we could see that at the surroundings, at the periphery, that there were amorphous silicon areas. And it's not just that you can do this for negative electrodes. This can also be done for positive electrodes. In this case, it was a lithium manganese oxide. This was also a dynamic experiment, and we were able to look at the individual particles and try to understand if there are heterogeneities in the degree of lithiation. Okay, so for example, here particle 1, you can see a particle that is quite an outlier. So the color bar axis corresponds to lattice parameter. This tells us is directly related to how much lithium is captured or released from a specific pixel or voxel in these images from your electrode. And we were able to see that there is quite a bit of heterogeneity in these materials and during operation. But it's not just the degree of lithiation, which you can get this information by looking at the position of the peaks. You can also get information about crystallite size. So this is the middle row in this figure on the right hand side. So that means that per pixel, you can get the average crystallite size of a specific component present in your sample. And this can also be very important within devices, but also material systems. And here I just wanted to show you that it is possible to not just have a 2D cross-section with XRD-CT, but nowadays you can have multiple 2D slices. So here it was 30 slices, so 30 XRD-CT datasets collected in less than 1 hour, right? So that means you can start having a 4-dimensional dataset. That is static, that's a room temperature, nothing is changing when it comes to chemistry. But you have 3 spatial dimensions, so X, Y, Z, and you have also the scattering, so the chemical information. And you can, so that means that you can get all this information that you saw for the 2D images, so large parameters, crystallite size, in 3D. And back in 2018, we performed the first 5-dimensional experiment. So we tried to do this 3D chemical imaging under different operating conditions. So this was not a battery, it was a catalyst, but the technique is the same. So in this case, what were the 5 dimensions? You had X, Y, Z, 3 spatial dimensions. You had the scattering angle or reciprocal space, if you want to think about this. So that was the chemical dimension. And then the 5th could be time, so temporal, or imposed chemical environment. However, as you saw, we're talking here about hundreds of thousands of diffraction patterns. There is a big data problem or challenge, one could say. So on the bottom left, you can see an image that we collected back in 2013. That was about 120 by 120 pixels large. And on the right-hand side is something that we collected just 4 years later. And that was 800 by 800. It took a little bit longer in terms of acquisition, but nothing that dramatically different. And this is more than, it's around 600,000, 640,000 diffraction patterns that you need to analyze from the dataset that you see on the right-hand side. And nowadays, it is almost trivial, I would say, to perform this type of experiments dynamically, so in situ or operando experiments at the various beamlines, and end up with having to analyze millions of diffraction patterns. So there is quite a challenge here if you are the scientist that you are tasked to analyze these data sets. It's not only the fact that they are very large, it's also they are very diverse. So they are very rich in chemistry, especially when it comes to real devices. For example, here we're looking at an image, an XRD-CT image that comes from a AAA lithium-ion battery. And when we look at the diffraction pattern from a voxel that comes from the positive electrode, it's, of course, it has very different characteristics when we look at the corresponding one from the negative electrode. So that means that very often conventional data analysis software packages, open source or commercial, it doesn't matter, they fail. They are not robust enough that you can have one starting model and that you can say to the program, go and analyze all these local diffraction patterns or local spectra or whatever you wish. So very often they can crash. And this was one of the main reasons that we spent a lot of effort at Finden developing state-of-the-art AI approaches to handle these large and chemically rich datasets. So one of these developments was this PQNet, so the parameter quantification network. That was a supervised learning approach. And we generated, in that case, we generated hundreds of thousands of diffraction patterns very quickly in matters of a couple of tens of minutes to train the network. The training also lasted 10 to 20 minutes, so very fast process. And then we said, go now and analyze all these local patterns present in the XRD-CT dataset. And in this case, in terms of, instead of taking us 10 to 20 hours with conventional approaches to analyze, for example, a 2D XRD-CT dataset of this lithium-ion battery, this was done, the same results were achieved within a couple of minutes. So it was game-changing for us, the development of this technology. And here it was just, I wanted to show you that we can create composites similar to conventional tomography. And it is the fact here that we can map all the different components. So we can see the don't have to go through the whole thing here, but we can see the polymer separator, the two electrodes, the two current collectors, the stainless steel. I don't think I have put the stainless steel, but anyway. So we can see more or less all the components present in a real device. And this is non-destructive, I repeat. So you can measure and then you can take your battery and go back to the lab, keep cycling if you want to bring it back again to measure it, etc. And in 21, we performed the first XRD-CT experiment of a lithium-ion battery, a cylindrical one. So a real device. This comes with challenges that we don't have to discuss here, data challenges. But I wanted to show you, for example, that we had these discharged cells. So these were static measurements. And you can see, as expected, the graphite. But there are regions where you have this partially lithiated graphite, so lithium carbon 30, 30 plus. And when we looked at it, actually, you can create the composite image here. This has to do something with the geometry of the cell and how it's designed and how the various components are placed within the cell. So this has a direct impact in the lithiation process. And this cannot be seen with any other technique. So even if you are a battery engineer, this type of images or results can help you think about how to design a new cell, perhaps, because this was this type of information is expected, let's say, but it has never been visually shown before. So in this case, for example, the fact that you see this red part here, that is the lithium carbon 30, is where you have in the other electrode the current collector, and at the edges is where you don't have component from the other electrode. Here we can see something about the charged cells. Again, it was like fast charge, fast and slow charged. We can see that the lithium carbon 6 forms, of course, first at the surface of the electrode. Again, this is, I repeat, this is not groundbreaking results, but this is you see the chemistry within a real device in real time. So we performed first these static measurements, and then we thought, okay, why don't we try this with a more interesting battery under real operating conditions and see what we get. And indeed, we tried with an 18650, so we published these results in 22. So this was the first operando or in situ XRD-CT experiment of a cylindrical lithium-ion battery. That yielded a lot of diffraction patterns. So more than 4 million diffraction patterns we had to analyze. If we hadn't developed the AI approach, the PQNet, we probably would have to give this data set from this experiment to a PhD student, wait for 4 years, and then hopefully see the student coming back with an answer analyzing the data sets. We were able to do this within a few months' time in this case. 13 different phases, 13 different chemical species were identified in this dynamic experiment. We were able to see here part of this experiment was this charging process. So went from 2.65 volt, nothing really extreme here, to 4.2, and we tracked the evolving solid state chemistry. So we're able to see that apart from the main part of the cell, let's say, that is homogeneously being lithiated, there are other regions that have a different degree of lithiation. There are parts that are inactive, but there are also parts that are just slower in lithiating, that are active though. But this has never been observed before, that you have some regions which it's not very clear to us either why this is happening, but this raises questions. And you can think that this is just a 2D cross-section. We could potentially do multiple 2D cross-sections to perhaps get an answer about this. Because this is images, we can, of course, virtually unroll the cell if we wish. Because we're just going from Cartesian to polar coordinates. And we can, again, notice various things. So if you remember with the static experiment, the previous static experiment, here we can again see green is the, RGB is probably not the best way, but anyway, green is the copper current collector, blue is the lithium carbon 12, red is lithium carbon 6. Again, we verify that it forms at the surface first, as expected, of course. But then here, look at the bottom right. The aluminium current collector is the green one, and then we can see that at the opposite sides inside the cell, at the other electrode, we have the lithium carbon 3030 plus, so the inactive material. So nothing is happening to this part of the negative electrode. We can also look at our cathode or the positive electrode anyway. So this was the nickel cobalt aluminum oxide. Again, we can see that the parts of the NCA that are directly connected to the aluminum tab, they are totally inactive. They are not, so it's the one that's called ROE3, region of interest 3 here, the yellow one. And you can see the two parts that are red at the bottom figure. So the chemistry is not changing there, so nothing's happening to the NCA. There are other regions, as we saw also with the negative electrode, that are active, but are delayed. There's a delayed lithiation region. Again, this has never been reported before because there are no means to observe this. And so these were just some examples that I wanted to show you. And we're developing also other approaches when it comes to machine learning and this type of complex data. One is self-supervised data denoising. As an example, we're training a neural net that has never seen clean data, and we're going from the image on the left to the image on the right. So it's almost like magic. And it is this is transferable to other techniques. So for example, here we're looking at neutron tomography data. Again, we can see the spiral on the right-hand side. The left is very, very noisy. It's even suppressing some of the ring artifacts. Similarly, when it comes to particles, you can see here that we are smoothing them, but without blocking pores. This is also very important. And even here, we have quite a few cracks, and we are not closing the pores. So this is also a very good tool for conventional imaging if you want to do image segmentation. And lately, final slide, we're also working on denoising our raw data, because that means that we can go even faster experimentally. So here, denoising raw 2D diffraction patterns. So we still have 5 minutes, so that's very good. This is just a summary page. Hopefully, I demonstrate that we can use techniques like XRD-CT, so diffraction tomography, that we can study both intact material and devices in the real industrial form without any compromises. If you want to do to study powder samples and capillaries, you can do this too, but it's not necessary. These techniques can reveal local heterogeneity in chemistry. You can do dynamic experiments by varying all sorts of operating parameters, for example, pressure, chemical environment, temperature, potential. They are non-destructive, these techniques, so you can take the sample at the end and go back to the lab and obliterate it if you wish to. We can have high spatial resolution, temporal resolution, depending on what you wish to achieve. And we think at Finden that there's a lot of potential in developing and applying state-of-the-art AI approaches to push the boundaries of these chemical imaging techniques. So for data analysis, for acquisition, etc. And currently, I'm working collaboration with Imperial College London, Sam Cooper's group, to further develop these AI approaches. And of course, this could not have been done, any of this stuff, without a lot of excellent collaborators over the years, because that's a team effort. So yeah, please ask any questions. Can we get the slides? Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm recording the session, so you should be able, I guess, to see the whole video at the end. Are there any other questions? Would you like to discuss anything? Stop recording.